So Hodgkin lymphoma affects a little over 8,000 patients each year in the US. About half of those patients have advanced stage disease. And the standard of treatment for advanced stage disease for years has been combination chemotherapy. But we use different chemotherapy regimens around the globe. Even within North America, pediatric and adult patients receive different regimens. And pediatric patients, a majority of them, actually receive consolidative radiation treatment after their chemotherapy is finished. So the treatment approaches for advanced stage Hodgkin lymphoma really have differed over the years. About 5 years ago, Hodgkin lymphoma patients gained a new treatment option, which is brentuximab-AVD for the treatment of their initial disease. So brentuximab-AVD is an antibody drug conjugate. It's directed against CD30 on the Hodgkin lymphoma tumor cells. And several studies showed that incorporating brentuximab-AVD into the initial treatment of Hodgkin lymphoma improved outcomes. It improved overall survival in adults and event-free survival in children. And so the drug was approved for the initial treatment of adults and children with advanced stage Hodgkin lymphoma. We learned that PD-1 biology played an important role in the kind of pathogenesis of Hodgkin lymphoma. So there are genetic changes in chromosome 9p241, which is the PD-1 ligand genes, and that leads to overexpression of the PD-1 ligands on the surface of Hodgkin lymphoma tumor cells. So Nivolumab and other PD-1 blocking antibodies are highly effective treatment for Hodgkin lymphoma that's relapsed or refractory, kind of resistant to many lines of therapy. And then over time, we've been kind of marching that drug and others like it backwards, right? So using them earlier on in the course of a patient's care. And there have been early trials showing that incorporating PD-1 blockade into frontline therapy is effective. So with that rationale, we designed S1826, which was a randomized study. It was a collaboration between the adult and pediatric cooperative groups in North America. So, trying to harmonize the treatment of advanced stage Hodgkin lymphoma to use all the patients, adult and pediatric, got the same AVD chemotherapy backbone, and patients were randomized to receive either nivolumab or brentuximab-AVD combined with that AVD backbone. So we enrolled just under 1,000 patients. It was a very representative study, so a quarter of the patients were under 18, 10% were over 60, a quarter of patients were Black or Hispanic, and there was a good representation of clinically high-risk patients. We found, actually, that Nivolumab-AVD improved progression-free survival compared to brentuximab-AVD with a hazard ratio of 0.48, so a 52% reduction in the risk of disease progression or death. This was, a pretty astounding result. Actually, it happened at a second interim analysis, so this was, a pre-planned kind of interim analysis that actually showed that the primary PFS endpoint crossed the statistical bound, and it was recommended that we consider the study question answered and we report the study results. So the 1-year progression-free survival after Nivolumab-AVD was 94%. The 1-year progression-free survival after brentuximab-AVD was 86%. So, a significant reduction in the risk of disease progression or death. Event-free survival was also improved with Nivolumab-AVD. And when you look at the different subgroups of patients treated on the trials, the benefit associated with Nivolumab-AVD was consistent across the subgroups. So when you look at the forest plot, all the squares are kind of favoring Nivolumab-AVD. So young, old, low clinical risk, high clinical risk. Stage 3, stage 4 especially, patients seem to benefit, patients with or without B symptoms. So it was really, an impressive result that demonstrated kind of consistent benefit across all the subgroups. I would say one of the most important results from the study is that, as opposed to a majority of pediatric patients receiving radiation at the end of their chemotherapy, in our study, 6 out of 1,000 received radiation. So less than 1% of patients received radiotherapy, which is a dramatic reduction in the amount of radiation that we're giving the very youngest patients who are most vulnerable to the late toxic effects of the radiation and chemotherapy that we give to cure their lymphoma. Oh, this is a tremendous advance for patients with advanced stage Hodgkin lymphoma. So, of course, we're continuing to confirm the durability of the benefit. We're it's still too early to assess overall survival, but with these results, Nivolumab-AVD is really poised to become a new standard of care for the treatment of advanced stage Hodgkin lymphoma. And I think future important questions will be, now that we have these results, and in the very highest risk patients, we're seeing quite excellent outcomes. Is there an opportunity to think about, de-escalation of therapy? Brentuximab vedotin actually is a very good drug for the treatment of Hodgkin lymphoma, so is there an opportunity to reintroduce it into the frontline setting? Or what's the role of brentuximab? Should we be using it second? So I think there are still important questions to ask and answer. But this is a tremendous advance for patients to have improved outcomes, reduced the use of radiation significantly. NAVD was much better tolerated than brentuximab vedotin-AVD. And it really just shows the power of the collaboration across the adult and pediatric cooperative groups to really drive research forward and answer questions more quickly. Again, I just want to speak to the really tremendous collaboration between SWOG, this Children's Oncology Group, and all of the cooperative groups to really be forward-thinking and try to harmonize all this complicated treatment of Hodgkin lymphoma that we do. And I think one really exciting result that came from this study is that because of our initial collaboration, we've sparked ongoing collaboration in adolescent and young adult patients with lymphoma. So all future studies in Hodgkin lymphoma and other kind of relevant lymphomas are collaborations across the age spectrum, so between the adult and the pediatric cooperative groups.